are covering in their classes. And this series, even though it'll take them a quarter, it'll take us a lot longer. I noticed on Wednesday night something. We had a couple songs. I think Levi and Darren led one or whatever. So by the time we got finished with that and had prayer, got to class, it was at the worst 10 after. And then Barry went on and on. No, Steve didn't get up. That's the deal. But I'm joking. But what I'm saying is, on Wednesday night, it seemed like they have 40 or 45 minutes. I mean, it seems like it's a long period of time. Man, we're in and out, and we hardly get started on Sunday morning, maybe 30 minutes. So we don't have a lot of time to go over that, and so it takes us longer. That was a big, long story to say it'll take us longer than a quarter that the young people have to talk about Jesus the Christ. They just finished up with the series The Devil, Sin, and Hell that we had did previously. And then, of course, we finished up our survey of the New Testament last week. Jesus the Christ this time. And then after we finish that, which may be quite a while from now, but we'll go back to the Old Testament and we'll do an Old Testament book by book. And so look forward to that as well. But Jesus the Christ. There was a paper out in the foyer, had the questions on it. We're going to do questions 1 through 10 at some point. And also put out there a weekly reading. Of course, that's for this week. You can get caught up with that sometime during this week. Most of these are familiar. As you can see there, John 1, Genesis 3, and you go on down the list. And so you'll know most of these, but we'll have that list back there that you can kind of keep up with, read ahead. I encourage you to get the sheets that are out there so you know the questions coming up. Sit down and think about these things as well, and prepare for class. All right, question number 1. Question number 1, Jesus the Christ. What was Christ's role in the creation? I want somebody to turn to John chapter 1. Timber, you're back there. Could you go to Hebrews 1? Derek? Colossians 1. John 1, everybody's turning there first. Kind of had this as a memory verse when we were kids, if you remember. John 1:1, what does it say? In the beginning was the Word. Word was with God. Word was God. Okay, that's how it starts. He was in the beginning with God. Verse 3, that's our key to answering this question. What does it say? Somebody read that. Josh, have you got that? Would you mind reading that? John 1, 1 through 3. You were intently looking there. I thought you had it picked out. John 1, verse 3. Remember, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, He was in the beginning with God.
I think it's hard for us to think about how He was, a lot of people have to think about how He was there in the beginning.
Right.
With God, when the creation was all happening and everything, He's always been like God.
Verse 3. Christ's role in the creation. All things were made through Him or by Him, and without Him nothing was made that was made. That's pretty clear, isn't it? So what was His role in the creation? All things were made by or through Him. Timber, verses 1 and 2 of Hebrews 1. Okay? The last phrase there is the key to this question, right? He made the world. Okay? God, in various times and in various ways, different ways, He communicated to us. But in the beginning, Christ, Jesus, made all things. All right, Colossians 1:16. Derek, was that you? Okay, so three passages there. John 1, Hebrews 1, Colossians 1, all tell us the same thing. Christ's role in the creation, all things were made by and through Him. Okay? Go there just a little bit further in Colossians. Laid it out there, didn't it? Was there anything else? Can you think of anything else? With our minds, can you think of anything else that it didn't mention there? No. So it's pretty clear. All things were made through or by Him. Okay? Tammy brought up a good point. It's hard for us to think about that. Not only was He present at the creation, but we can read in the Bible. That's where we get our knowledge from. We wouldn't have any idea if we didn't have the Bible, would we? Maybe not any idea. But we can come to an understanding through and because of the Bible. Not only was Jesus, Christ, the Son, or as John calls Him, the Word, present at creation, He was before the creation, right? And so was God the Father and God the Spirit. Okay? We can read that there are three distinct beings, personalities in this what we call the Godhead. Okay? That's hard for us to comprehend how it can be one, but there's three parts. But we kind of see that all the time on a lesser degree, and I'm an old coach, used to be. That's what we kind of see with teams, isn't it? They're one team, but they have different players, different roles to make that up. And we always say, boy, when they're working together as a team, nobody can stop them. Now, that doesn't always work because teams are made up of humans, not God. But these three that make up the one God, they're always in harmony, always in unity. They're working together. They're of the same mind, the same purpose. Do you agree with that? But it's still hard for us, what we say, wrap our minds around it. Okay? What was God doing before creation? Existing? We don't know. We don't know what He was doing. All we know is when it starts in Genesis chapter 1, God's there, isn't He? He's always been there, is there, will always be there. That's what eternal means. Not what it means. That's a practical application of what eternal is. Always has and always will exist. Okay? Genesis 1, in the beginning, God. And when it's talking there about God, God the Father, that's kind of easy to comprehend. God the Father was there. Who else was there? Okay? God the Son, the Word, and the Spirit were all there. Turn to Genesis chapter 1. I think in verse 3, that's God the Father. What happens in verse 3? God spoke. What did God say? Let there be light. Okay? And then if you go on down through there, God is going to speak. We would say speak into existence. Light. The earth, the heavens, stars, moon, plants and animals. Speak into existence those things. But what's the role of God the Son? When God spoke, let there be light, what happened? There was light. That's God the Son, the Word, creating. Okay? We can see that in verse 9. I wrote these down. Look at verse 9, verse 11, and verse 15. Unless I wrote it down incorrectly. Does each one of those at some point in that verse say, and it was so? God spoke, God the Father, and it was so is the Word creating. What about the Spirit? Was the Spirit there? Very clearly at one point it said, and the Spirit of God moved across the deep. What was the Spirit's job? Well, I don't know if that come out. What was the Spirit's operation during this creation process? I hate to say simple terms, organization, because it's more than that, but we understand what that means. Brought it all together, but I think we can even say it goes beyond that. What else does it say? What do you remember about creation? After it was done each time, what did God say? It was good. I think that's the Spirit's role, the Holy Spirit's role in creation. Organized, made it good. Verse 10, 12. What about verse 31? What does it say? Not only was it good, what was it? Okay, it was very good. Now, that's not to say there's not more to that. But if we think about it, God the Father spoke it. The Word, Christ, became flesh, became Jesus. That's who we're talking about. We'll speak on that a little later. And the Spirit were all there working in unison, in harmony at creation. And we know they were all there because look at verse 26. When it comes to creating man, what does God say? Let me make man in my image. You know what it says. What does it say? Let us make man in our image. That's plural, isn't it? My and mine would have been singular, but it's let us make man in our image. So there's a plurality there. The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Those three working together and in unison. Look at verse John 1:14. I mentioned this just a little bit ago. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, the same was in the beginning with God. All things were made through Him. Verse 14 says what? This same deity, being, personality of the Godhead, this word, logos, what happened? Verse 14. Became flesh, dwelt among us. We know who that's talking about now, don't we? That part, that personality, that being of the Godhead became flesh, dwelt among us. Do we grasp the seriousness of that? Verse 18 tells us that Christ's presence on earth was declared. Was declared. That word logos, word is the way it's translated, is talking about the divine expression. Okay? Now there's a lot of issues and problems with the way some people determine that, but we can know God through the Bible, right? But we're also, by Jesus, given an example. God is love. Did Jesus express, was He an expression of God's love? The ultimate expression, wasn't He? Jesus, thinking it not robbery to be equal with God, what did He do? Gave up heaven. Came to earth. Lived among us. What was His purpose? To live a perfect life, a perfect example, and be that sacrifice for us. Maybe some other stuff, but that's what we're focused kind of on today in this introduction. Christ was God, is God, will always be God, has always been God. He gave that up for a period of time to come here because man needed Him. Because man needed Him. Any questions or comments so far? I know maybe a lot. But why did man need Christ?
You can't be in the presence of God with sin, so Christ had to take the sin away from
Okay.
cover the sin of man.
Almost from the beginning. Almost from the beginning. Christ was promised to man. What happened between the beginning, creation, and what we have here, the first promise of Christ in Genesis 3? Just a couple chapters, 3 chapters in. Something changed. John mentioned it. Sin came into the world, didn't it? Okay, by the deception of Eve, Adam and Eve both sinned. They ate of the fruit that they were not supposed to eat of. They were forbidden to eat of it, prohibited to eat of it, but they did anyway. They were tricked. Eve was tricked. Adam did so willingly. Put man in a relationship different than they had previously with God. There was a separation, wasn't there? Okay? They weren't with God. They lost access to the tree of life. And so something had to happen. Okay? We used that word. We talked about it in our last couple classes in the last series. That word reconciled. Okay? Does anybody remember what reconcile is? If I'm reconciling my checkbook, you have checkbook. Do you still reconcile your checkbook today? Some of you do. I'm sure the young people don't even have any idea. Where you sit down, you know, the bank used to send you your old checks and you'd sit there and you'd go mark that one off to make sure that what was over here matched what was here according to your funds and your value. You all remember that? Y'all are sitting there like, that's old school, right? Now they don't even send you your checks back to you anymore. Okay? But reconciling it. Make this match over here. Man had went away. Man had sinned. God didn't move. Who moved? Man did. But in order for man to come back and be back, there had to be some reconciliation. That's even a bigger word, isn't it? Yeah.
To become friendly again after an estrangement.
Yeah, that's exact. I mean, that's literally what it means, to become friends again after an estrangement. Or we use the term Christ is our mediator between two parties that are, and we use that word variance, opposition. We became an opposition, the human race did, Adam and Eve, because of that sin. So something had to bring it back. That plan, that method that was going to happen for that involved the Word becoming flesh and dwelling among us. So the first promise about Christ, at the end of that, after Adam and Eve's sentence is passed, got to leave the garden, work by sweat of your brow, difficulty in child labor. We understand, we know where we're going, okay? So there was another promise that was made. But there's going to be a way for you to get back to the tree of life through salvation, eternity. And that promise was Genesis 3:16. 3:15. I knew when I said that day, didn't I? Genesis 3:15. This is what it says, wasn't it? It, the seed of the woman, which we know is Christ, or we find out later is Christ, shall bruise thy head. Who are they talking to there? Who is thy? It's Satan, isn't it? What was Satan going to do? Bruise Christ's heel. And we know that is reference to Jesus dying, having to die. Okay? So the first promise about Christ is Christ will bruise Satan's head by ending death, by becoming that sacrifice, by ending spiritual death, by physically dying, okay? Offering away by His blood for man to be reconciled, to not be estranged anymore to his friend, God to become our friend again, or be on friendly terms, not in opposition. Okay? So the first promise about Christ is talking about what He's going to ultimately do to Satan and Satan's power. He's going to take away that. Remember? Death is going to be defeated. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. And he, that's talking about Christ, shall bruise your head. It's talking about Satan. And you, Satan, shall bruise his, Christ's heel. Okay? So that's the first promise. Happens early on, doesn't it? 3rd chapter in, about halfway through that chapter. By the way, that's not a... at that point, would Satan have had legs? Anyway, you all understand what a pic. That's just a, I just try to find some kind of picture. All right. Number 3, God's promise. That's got to get there some way, doesn't it? And the Old Testament, that thread, you've heard it called that thread that runs through the entire Old Testament is getting us to the point that we're going to read about in the first chapters of Matthew, Luke, even what we read there, John 1:14. So what is that thread? That thread is Christ is coming. Okay? The Word is coming and going to be flesh. So God's promise, in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Genesis 22. Does anybody know who God's talking to there? Talking to Abraham, maybe Abram at that time. But we know him as Abraham. Okay? Called him out of the land of Ur. Go to a place that you're not going to know. We know in Hebrews chapter 11 that Abraham did it, didn't he? Okay? There's going to be land. There's going to be a nation. There's going to be a blessing on all those nations. Okay? In thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Chapter 26. Who's it talking to? Not Abraham, but who's next? Abraham's son, Isaac. So the promise is passed down to the next generation. Abraham to Isaac. You know where I'm going. Chapter 28, who's that? Jacob, the next in line. Okay? So this lineage, we know what lineage is, right? The forefathers. We see it in the Bible as the begattas. Begat. The son of, we see those lineage. One comes after the other. We have one that goes all the way back to Adam, don't we? Have them that go back to David, go back to Abraham. Okay? So, in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Genesis 12:3, Genesis 22:9 or 22:18. Abraham's faith was confirmed through the offering of Isaac, his son. Not only did he leave the place he didn't know, go to a different place, but we see here, and there are so many parallels. Sometimes it's called types and antitypes or shadows of things to come. If you look at what went on when Abraham was told to offer Isaac, it parallels a lot of things that we see in the New Testament about the life and the death of Jesus. God sacrificing His Son. Abraham being asked to sacrifice his son. How many days' journey did they go? 3. How many days was Jesus buried? There's just a lot of things that you can parallel and see the types and antitypes of that. And we mentioned there 26 and 28, the promise is repeated to Isaac, and then it's also repeated to Jacob. So the lineage of Christ is starting to be revealed. And it started with the man we know, Abram, later as Abraham. I said that. I didn't flip it up there, did I? It's fulfilled. We see the fulfillment of that, of course, in the books of Matthew and there again in Luke. If you want to write those down, I'll leave that up there for just a second. All right. Question number 4. This is important. Jesus is from a royal tribe. Okay? Later on in the history of this nation, Jacob becomes Israel, so we know them as the children of Israel or the nation of Israel. They decide, I guess it's a rebellion, and they say, we want a king. God had not allowed them to have a king, but eventually He's going to give in to their demands. The first king, you remember, said Saul. Does anybody remember what tribe Saul was from? Tribe of Benjamin, I heard. That's correct. This is not the royal tribe of Christ. Okay? Benjamin, one of the 12 sons of Jacob. but there was another tribe that was picked. Normally in that culture, who would have been the one that would have received the greatest blessing? The first one. That was Reuben, if you go back and look. But that's not the answer to this question, was it? There were things that go on, if you read in Genesis, that caused Reuben, Simeon, Levi to be disqualified, the right word? Maybe. Okay? We're not going to cover that. We'll probably cover that in the next series, the book by book. But the royal tribe of Christ is one of the sons of Jacob, one of the sons of, as he became Israel, and that is Judah. Okay? So Judah, one of the 12 sons, is the lineage through which Christ will come. We understand what that means. This one, followed by this one, begot that one, born to that one, on down the line. We're talking about between the first promise, estimate 4,000 years. After this promise, somewhere between 1,750 to 1,500 years, it's starting to be revealed. And remember that thread that's going through the Old Testament. Royal tribe of Christ is Judah. In Jacob's last words, Genesis chapter 49, remember they've all come down to Egypt because of the circumstances surrounding one of their brothers, Joseph. Joseph being in Egypt, he brings the whole family down. Jacob is going to die, and before he does, there in Egypt, in his last words to his sons, it's revealed that Christ will come from the tribe of Judah. Okay? Fulfilled, Luke 3:33. We see there that name is mentioned. All right. Let's do one more while Steve rings the bell. Now see if he gets up on Wednesday night like he cuts me short every time. I'm talking just as much as Barry talks. Promise to David. David, one of those kings, he was of the tribe of Judah through the lineage. Jesse, Boaz, Obed, Boaz. We can see it going back, all the way back to Judah. David was considered by many of Jesus' time to be the greatest of the kings, if not Solomon, his son. But David is highly looked upon as a great king. And so Christ is prophesied that he is going to come through David, the tribe of Judah, the royal tribe. And the promise was to David that one would be raised up to sit on his throne. Okay? Now, I can understand the confusion that some of the Jews are going to have later on, that this is going to be not a heavenly kingdom, okay, but we would call it an earthly kingdom. What kind of king was David? David was a conqueror. He was sitting on a physical throne. He had subjects. He made war. All those things that we think about of a earthly manner. And we're going to raise up one to sit on David's throne. There could be some, if you just had a kind of a outside knowledge of what's going on and not all the prophecies and understand them, you could see that that would be the case, that many of the Jews of the day when Jesus is actually going to be born and lived, that they thought it was going to be an earthly kingdom. Raise up one to sit on David's throne, Isaiah chapter 9 and 7, Psalm 132, 11. This is going to be fulfilled. We see that David is in the lineage that's listed there in the book of Luke. Many Jews, as I mentioned, look for an earthly kingdom. Christ's kingdom is the church. It's a heavenly kingdom. It's going to be eternal. Where's Jesus sitting today? Okay? Right there at the throne, isn't He? Over the kingdom. The kingdom's the church. We'll spend a little more time on this next week. I think this is going to be a good series, a good lessons that we're going to have. Appreciate your attention today. If you didn't get the questions and the reading guide, be sure to do that as you leave today. Any other questions or comments before we close? Kids are coming in. We'll take a short break and then we'll be back for our worship period.